Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Fireside chat. It's my pleasure to welcome you. Good morning to the US, good afternoon to Germany. This Fireside chat is about the question of accelerating green city planning. My name is Alanus von Radecki. I've been heading the Future Cities program of the German Fraunhofer Society.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Fireside chat.
For the last couple of years, and I'm now at the moment endowed with transforming what we've learned into market-ready solutions. And I'm here with a fantastic team with experts on the issue, with Catherine Baker from Landon Bone Baker Architects, with Nisha Baliga from Hester Street, and with Susanne Schmelcher from the German Energy Agency. Before they will introduce themselves briefly, let me just set the scene. We have heard before in some fantastic contributions about the importance of, bringing nature back into the city, sort of remarrying nature and urban development, using nature to mitigate climate emissions in our cities and to improve life. When I look outside the window in my cities, then today there isn't much of this yet to be seen, unfortunately. There has been a report released by the Wuppertal Institute, a German think tank, on the time scale which is left for us to go to carbon neutrality. The Wuppertal Institute researchers have shown us that for Germany, we have about 10 years left to go down to 85%, like to reduce 85% of our emissions. And we need to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035 if we want to stay within the Paris Climate Accord. And this accounts basically for all developed societies. And we've heard the impact of cities. So basically, cities is the place where we need to achieve this very, very ambitious goal. Now, when I look out the window, I ask myself, how can we achieve that in such a complex system like a city? How can we manage to drastically change our cities and transform our cities within the next 15 years? How can we accelerate green city planning? How can we come from the good pictures, the good images, the good concepts, and the good pilot projects into actual scale within cities across the globe? So that, to me, is the key question I would like to discuss with Catherine, with Nisha, and with Susanne. I'm so glad that you are here to join, and I would really like you to introduce yourself briefly. So, Catherine, please give it a go. Tell us what you do, what your company and organization does briefly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Catherine Baker. I am an architect with the firm Landon Bone Baker Architects. We are based in Chicago, and our firm was formed in 1987. And the majority of our work is centered around affordable housing, which I should preface that by saying it's really subsidized housing, but it's at an affordable level. So the renters are at a subsidy, because I think what we're building is not really affordable, but it is subsidized by government funding. So whereas I think in Europe you would call it social housing, here we would call it affordable housing. And so a lot of what we do is on a limited budget. Most of our work is in Chicago. We're working in neighborhoods all over the city. So if you come to Chicago, you probably haven't been to some of the neighborhoods where we are doing our work, which is really exciting to us because we get to see and learn from all the different neighborhoods in the city. Our firm was also the first firm to do a multifamily passive house in the city of Chicago, which is a little bit different than the rest of the country because Chicago, the building codes in Chicago are a little bit different because we have we're a little tougher on fire. We have a bit of an issue with fire and construction here. So we're thrilled to have done the first passive house in the city, and we hope to do more. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Fantastic. Nisha, you're a co-executive director at Hester Street. please introduce yourself and tell us what you do, what your company does.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be part of this discussion and share this space with such accomplished colleagues. So as you said, I'm the co-executive director of Hester Street. I'm an urban planner. I'm an immigrant from India, and Hester Street is based in New York City. I'm also, 8 months into pandemic parenting, so please excuse anything I tried to plan for in the background. So Hester Street's mission is to ensure that cities are shaped by the people who live in them. We devote urban planning, design, and development expertise to support community-led change. And we facilitate deeply democratic planning and policy making to advance racial and economic justice and to radically recreate cities shaped by low-income communities of color. We are proudly a women-led, majority women, majority people of color organization. Our staff of 25 consists of urban planners, architects, urban designers, community developers, and community organizers. Our partners include governments, civic institutions, community-based organizations. And we work a lot in New York City, but also throughout the tri-state area in the United States, in Puerto Rico, and then increasingly we've been doing some nationwide work. And over the last 5 years, in terms of climate change and green city planning, we've worked on several community-led projects around post-Sandy recovery efforts in the Rockaways, which is a section of New York City, Lower Manhattan, as well as Red Hook in New York City. We've also done post-Hurricane Maria planning and recovery efforts in Puerto Rico, and we've been working on a future-facing climate adaptation roadmap for New York City. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much, Nisha. Terrific. And then we also have Susanne here, team leader for integrated districts and urban heating systems at the German Energy Agency. Susanne, please give us a glimpse of what you do and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Very much. Yeah, my name is Susanne Schmelcher. As already said, I work for the German Energy Agency, and at the German Energy Agency, we see ourselves as the center for expertise for energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, and intelligent energy systems. And also, we really our main target is to implement the energy transition and to form it really into a successful project. So we see ourselves as the agency for the applied energy transition and contributing to the attainment of energy and climate policy objectives. More specifically, in my team, we develop solutions for integrated districts and also for urban heat systems, and we help, basically the main work is what we do, we help the actors to put them into practice, and we do this both nationally and internationally. And of course, for us, as already was also said in the entrance bit, that it's a lot about transforming infrastructure. So we really have to find concepts how to transform our infrastructure towards carbon neutrality. And that is something we're mainly busy with, thinking about what kind of policy, rules, regulations, and instruments we need at that to really get the infrastructures transformed. And especially we do this at the German Energy Agency also by bringing together partners from politics and industry and diverse stakeholder dialogues. Yeah, so much at the moment. Thanks for being here. I'm happy now that we can discuss this very important issues together.
Thank you so much, Susanne. So I'm delighted to be discussing this with this terrific panel. I think it's a very good time also to put this issue on the agenda. I was really happy to also see this new term, Biopolis, coming up for this conference, because it just stresses the importance of linking nature and to cities. I think we all heard this fantastic contribution by Solène Wolf just before our panel started, where she was showing her vision of Biopolis and where she was showing how and under what circumstances cities and nature can reintegrate. I cannot help but, of course, wish that we would be able to achieve it, but also just raise some questions there. So when I see this vision of the green, the integrated, the ideal, let's say, Biopolis, I ask myself, where's all the traffic? Where are the highways? Where is, where are the metro lines, the tram lines? Also, there's this famous quote saying, if you love nature, you shouldn't live in it. So that basically means if we want to, preserve nature, if we want to work with nature to mitigate climate change and to mitigate resource consumption, then this also means, to me, but maybe I'm wrong, a higher density within our cities. So how do we integrate nature and a very dense city with people living in rather dense environments? So maybe we start off with you, Catherine, because you're also working a lot on exactly that subject. Can you share the vision of Soleil Involve? What is your vision of Biopolis, and how does what you do contribute to it?
We start thinking about this on two different levels, and sometimes we'll use the term sustainability maybe to frame that. But on the larger picture, how are our clients? And again, we're focused on housing, and housing is a big issue here. Many people spend way too much money on housing, so we know that's one of the pillars for equity, justice, everything else that goes along with someone's environment. So how does, first of all, where are the residents in the community living in a larger context? And then how do we treat it at a very local level? So I think I would start by saying we start locally, right? If you can start with each site that you're designing for as being almost self-contained and say, can we store all our stormwater? Can we generate all of our energy on this single site without having to rely on the rest of the city to provide services and functions? And I think, again, by starting at that very, very local level, we start to address the larger issues. We also start looking at what are the materials we use in our housing. Are they healthy materials? Are they affecting asthma? We know that a lot of our clients, a third of the children that we design for have asthma. So how do we design for that? So again, I think in some cases, just thinking super, super small, very minute about exactly what we're designing and building is one way for us to address this. And then if everyone can think in that small level, I think it starts to spread and works globally.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. So focus, have a decentral focus is what you would suggest. Look at the district, look at the very local level and see how we can self-sustain ideally, and from there achieve the impact on the larger scale. That's a very intriguing thought. Now, Susanne, I believe you work on urban heating systems, on the energy grid, and on the question of how do we power all that? How do we power the future city if we want to, go away from coal, from gas, also in Germany from nuclear power plants? How do we power that? Would you agree that the sort of the decentral focus is the right one to choose? Is it enough to stay at the district level and to, can we be self-sustained when it comes to energy consumption, energy production, if we maintain our focus on the district?
I would not agree, because I think, I don't know how many studies are on that, but our projects have shown that basically, especially in dense cities, you will not be able to cover the energy needs you have there, because the denser it is, the higher your energy demand is, and the less space you basically also have to generate this energy. Because if you're talking about electricity, you probably have like PV panels, and for that you need areas, and also if you're talking about heat, we can use the heat from the ground, but then again also there you need areas. So I guess in a very spread, not very dense environment, also with a lot of resources in the surroundings, say maybe biomass, you could probably have this self-sustained concept. But I think we shouldn't really, in regards to energy, we shouldn't really aim for that, because basically also we have all the smart technologies now. We have sector coupling technologies that can basically link the different sectors. So if we really, for the energy transition as a whole, it doesn't really help to think locally. But what it helps to think locally is that we really also have to contribute on that level. So we really have to think about how we get energy demand down within a building, because I would see energy efficiency as a really. So that is, I think, something we have to really look at locally, and also we have to use the resources that are there. But we will not be able to really cover it all from there, and we really also have to think it as an integrated system. So the local system with the national system, and we have to use this kind of coupling technologies to also get, for example, through power to heat technologies, get like the electricity from like the big kind of wind farms far away into the cities. So for the energy part, it's probably that we need an integrated approach.
Thank you. Okay, very interesting. So you would say that we need to basically come from both sides. We can do something on the local level, such as reducing the need for energy, but we shouldn't fully look to the decentral level to try to provide for all heating and electricity, because it could also maybe get in conflict about space. So we would maybe have to choose whether we would use the rooftop to produce solar energy, or whether we use it for greening and for enhancing biodiversity. Nisha, what is your experience with this, and how would you describe your vision of Biopolis? And what do you think? What do we need to do in order to get there?
I think my vision for Biopolis, or I think the things that are really important as we're sort of thinking towards the future, is to really look at both physical and social infrastructure, and sort of have a framework for designing our cities away from extractive economies to regenerative economies, but also sort of look at how they intersect with deep democracy and issues around racial justice at the core, because we cannot separate physical infrastructure from social infrastructure. And so that is something that we really sort of look at in our approach for sort of climate justice planning. And we really think that, when you're looking at that, you need to sort of think through how can we create conditions in which, beautiful green infrastructure amenities or carbon neutral buildings or high quality green jobs are accessible to everyone, and not just a select few. That is sort of something that in the United States is something that is very true. We need to ensure that how we plan cities and who we include when we're planning and making decisions is very important, because it's not just about setting goals and moving towards goals of carbon neutrality, which are critically important, but how we do that. We really believe process matters. And so in our work, it is fundamental to us to design goals, processes, decisions in a way that include people that have been traditionally left out of decision making, and have been, and are now currently disparately impacted by climate change. And so that is sort of the core to how we work. It is both the goals and the sort of physical issues related to green city planning, but also the how, the process, and the who.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nisha. You said something very important there, I believe, which is to include people who are, who are affected within the planning. I think this is particularly important in order to, not come with some theories and concepts that in reality don't actually do the job or are not accepted. Do you, by any means, have an example that you could share where you have achieved something like that?
So I think I can give an example of work we did in the Rockaways, which is a part of New York City just after Hurricane Sandy. And Rockaways was one of the places that was really deeply impacted. There was power shortages, there was cutoff from infrastructure, there was job loss. And in a post-recovery planning effort, we engaged deeply with communities that were directly impacted in public housing in the United States, or social housing, as you might call it in Germany. And, I think what we found is that sometimes what experts consider are the most important issues are often not the way that they land with people living in these conditions. And so it was our assumption that things like transportation was beyond housing. Transportation was sort of one of the key issues that we should be focusing on because this area had been impacted and cut off from New York City for a fair amount of time following the hurricane. And while that was definitely critically important, while we engaged communities about the impact of Hurricane Sandy and how they can sort of deal with recovery, what really came out was not just the physical impact of being separated from jobs or other things from New York City, but the mental health impact. And so that, mental health and trauma response as part of resilience planning is something that we didn't really anticipate, but it came up from communities, the trauma of being separated from families, from not being able to get to things they needed, and then being disconnected from a variety of resources was something that we didn't anticipate. And so I think when you listen and learn from those that have the lived experience from these issues, it uncovers issues that you might not have thought about as, quote unquote, an expert, because you might focus on physical things, but there's so much more there.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, what a wonderful example. I think there's several really good examples of this. I've seen an example from the city of Stockholm where it was a very simple planning approach, where the city in the municipal housing district just put up a large aerial view of the district and asked the local residents to put 3 dots there: a yellow dot for where they live, a red dot for where they don't like it, and a green dot for where they like it, like an area which they like. And there was a lottery to be gained. If you would participate, you could receive, I think, 1 month of free rent. So this, at the end of that, I think it was like a 2-week participation, 40,000 dots were put on that map. And it was a terrific co-created map showing exactly what are the hotspots where people don't feel comfortable in the district and that need urgent attention. So these approaches, I believe, are really important to make the urban transformation which we need accepted, and also just going into the right direction. So thank you so much, the 3 of you, for sharing these initial insights. I think by now we do have sort of some let's say blurry schematic concept of what we would understand what future Biopolis would look like: sustainable, green, just. Obviously with sort of high tech also, because we need it for the provision of energy and transportation. Now, when I drive or walk through cities, and I'm seeing many cities. I've been working with lots of cities across, like, for the last couple of years. You see so many things, just happening. You look out the window and you see, people purchasing a new SUV, and just there's a new coal-fired power plant being built, etc. And I ask myself, how the hell do we manage to get that transformation done within the next 15 years? Bearing in mind that cities are path-dependent systems. So we have built an infrastructure around fossil fuels. We've built an infrastructure around the car. And we've built houses that run on oil. So how do we manage that that huge transition towards a carbon neutral society and carbon neutral cities within the next couple of years. I know that this is, it's a huge question. It's probably too big for this panel, but nonetheless, I would like to ask you, what examples do you know of urban planning and urban development that can be scaled quickly to cities? Because I've seen many cities start with reinventing the wheel, start from scratch, start, an entire innovation process all over again, although fantastic solutions have already been piloted and proven somewhere else. So what elements of Biopolis do you know that can be scaled quickly to cities around the globe? Maybe Catherine, do you want to give it a go?
Sure, I'll try. And I guess I'm usually working in the Chicago context and the U.S. context of maybe how we do things here. So for our type of work, and one way to address that quickly, again, is at the very local level. So if you're making local decisions, you can control where your stormwater is running off on your site. And I know there are bigger issues that revolve around larger policies nationwide or worldwide, but to do something quickly and actually feel like you have agency, it does start to happen locally. And then on a city level, where I think we've had success is at the building code level. Once you start a local policy at a building code where we have energy efficient building codes that we need to meet, and once you start saying a certain percentage of your energy needs to come from renewable supplies, you have to do it, right? You'll start to do it. We saw that with accessibility requirements, where now buildings are designed for physical, all different abilities, physical, and we should do that for sustainability. And so I think cities usually do have their own building codes and they can adopt them. And with the idea that cities probably cannot produce all their energy. So if you start saying, your building must run on renewables, and then it will spark more wind farms or solar farms to supply that energy. So I would look at that policy level, local policy level, and building codes.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Definitely quite a huge leverage point there. I just want to share one example. Also from Stockholm, yeah, funny enough, which maybe highlights the power of changing regulations. The city of Stockholm wanted to increase the percentage of electric vehicles in the share of the basically on the fleet on the street, and in order to do so, the city thought about the taxi drivers as one specific stakeholder group to target. And they thought about, okay, what is an incentive that matters to the taxi drivers, to this particular stakeholder group? And then the city came up with the regulations stating that whoever owns a hybrid or an electric vehicle as a taxi gets to be first in line at the airport. So that, of course, was a highly attractive incentive for all taxi drivers to get an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, because it immediately impacts on your daily business. So with this single regulation, with this single rule, the city of Stockholm actually achieved to transform the taxi fleet by 80% within 6 months. So that was quite a tremendous change, and it shows the power of regulation. So thank you very much for highlighting that, Catherine. Nisha, what would you say? Have you got elements of urban development, of, let's say, Biopolis, that can be scaled quickly to cities around the globe, which would help us to accelerate green city planning?
Just want to add to sort of what you and Catherine talked about, which is this combination of looking at policy level change to incentivize behavior I think we've sort of, so on a macro level, I just want to also agree that I think that is something that can really accelerate green city planning when you incentivize, access to something that will, for example, in New York City, over the last 10 years, there's been a huge investment in sort of the bicycle infrastructure. And then in the last few years to really also be making that more accessible to neighborhoods, through the shared bike program that would not have initially been part of that because they sort of created a lower barrier to entry for public housing residents to use the city bike program. And they also sort of changed some of the ways that they were planning the bike infrastructure to make it more friendly to women, protected bike lanes, and so on and so forth. So I think both this combination of incentivizing and policy level change, but with an inclusive lens, so that you are really sort of deepening who's using it, is something that can really accelerate green planning. And when you do it for those that are sort of traditionally been left out or might not have been part of these processes, but you center them, you benefit everyone. So I think one of the ways that you can really sort of accelerate green city planning is always starting from an inclusive lens, because that will benefit the whole.
Thank you so much, Nisha. Yes, and Susanne, can you underline that you agree with the starting at the policy level, and would you say the policy level that we need in order to scale, well, particularly from your area of expertise, let's say the heating and the energy systems across cities in Germany and Europe are existing? Would you say we've got the policies, or what is your take on that, Susanne?
I think what we have is we have like strategies at the very sort of high level. So we have like a Paris Climate Agreement, or we have like national sort of target frameworks, and then cities put their frameworks. But then somehow my feeling is that then there is like a gap to like the really local level where all these actors are like implementing developments, because they are not really forced to do like a climate neutral development. I mean, if they want to, they could still use a lot of fossil fuels. So at that point somewhere there's like a gap, or sort of thing with all these targets being set. There's missing a link between what's actually happening on the ground. And I completely agree with what everybody said, that we need policies on that level to basically, in a way, I mean, force is always not a nice word, but like to really try to change the developments that are happening. And I guess one big obstacle is probably the economic situation, that most of the things which are probably climate friendly or would go towards carbon neutrality are not really competitive with like, if you talk about heat prices, for example, that are generated by renewable energies, that are not really competitive against the fossil prices. Or like, I think Catherine was mentioning a passive house, which is great that they basically managed that also in like a social housing environment. But I guess that is like the problem, that we still have this economic that it's still more expensive. And that's why it's probably also for the policymakers difficult to say, hey, everybody has to now do this, because basically it would mean private investments, which I think have to find solutions how basically the transformation is not only like green in a way, but it's also a socially fair and just and basically manageable by all sorts of bodies of our society. So I guess policies are important, but then again, how do we basically manage these policies without like making things not economically feasible for certain parts of our society anymore? I guess that is the big trouble, why we don't really see much of these things, we basically set ourselves in very high level strategies, but that's why we don't really see it happening on the ground.
Yeah, thank you, Susanne. You touch upon one point there, which I believe is somewhere, at the heart of why it takes so long and why it is so hard to initiate that transformation. When we look at our cities and talk about path dependency, we have spent so much money on an infrastructure and on a system that is perfectly functioning on fossil fuels, which means that every additional investment along that trajectory is rather cheap because it adds to an existing system. But any sort of system change is unproportionately more expensive. For example, if we want to transform to a hydrogen economy, or for example, if we want to transform to an electric vehicle, like battery-based electric vehicle fleet, we need to install the charging systems, we need to install the energy management systems, we need to change the factories for building the cars, etc. We need to have new type of power plants. So this makes the entire system so difficult, and also it puts the lag into our urban transformation. Since time is running, I just would like to touch with you upon one additional point, because I believe it's quite important. I know we could go on forever like this. I was wondering about your take on data, because we've been working a lot with a range of European cities around all these smart systems, and I know there's sort of wide controversy about, is a smart city a just city, and do we need it, or is it just a tech drive by the industry? But I believe there is, at the core, there is one thing which is rather clear, where we need data to run more connected systems. So the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time. What do we do at night if there's no wind? We need to have stored energy. We need to have a more decentral use of energy, and all that requires data. Also, if we want to come to an economy or a community that shares their assets instead of owning them, we need very good information systems that allow us to share our assets and to share our whatever we have. And also for that, of course, we need data and we need information technology. Now we've seen, and I'm sure you're all aware of it, the Waterside project in Toronto failing due to resistance of citizens on Alphabet, on Google, using urban planning and smart city development as an entry into a, let's say, a digital city planning, a digital city process. At the same time, we need data and digital technologies. What is your take on that? How do you, how do you rate the digital element? What do we need to do, in your opinion, in order to balance these corporate platform models, which we are seeing all over, against a more citizen-centric, digital sovereign approach? So how do we make sure that we stay citizens in the digital age, and that we dominate these data-driven solutions in a way which are citizen-centric and just, and not, let's say, 100% corporate-driven? What is your take on that, Nisha? Do you have an opinion? Do you want to go?
Sure. I mean, I think this is something we've been really grappling with, just, data and the use of data in planning processes, or just in the cities, just at large, as you spoke about. And I think as you said, is we cannot sort of pretend that data gathering and data information and big data are not important. They are something that are critical to sort of planning for more efficient, for just cities. At the same time, currently, like as you said, there's a lack of transparency and democracy in how data is used, who extracts it, who has control over it. And so I think our approach to this has been, and we've been doing a project about this, is how do you create the conditions for democratizing data? And one of the things we've been doing, and this happens in a lot of the processes we work in, where a government or an entity comes to a community and they want to sort of gather data, they want to gather indicators, they want to get information about how communities might use something, what they need, but then that data is not shared back with the community for them to see how it will be used or how their ideas will be implemented. And so one thing we've been doing, and I know we're short of time, is we've been working with communities to create design principles or sort of rules of engagement around data use that center the citizens' needs or the residents' needs so what are the operating principles here? Who's going to have the data? How is it collected? How is it open source? How is it transparent so that it doesn't become extractive and opaque, but something that can be used by multiple parties to advance their needs? So that's, just a quick snapshot of something we've been really working on in planning processes, is rules of engagement.
Thank you. Yes, that's definitely quite an important contribution. I'd really love to learn more about that. Maybe you can share after the session. Catherine, have you come in touch with that question? Is that something you had to deal with already?
So, and maybe expanding on what Nisha was saying, can we use data to benefit the people we're designing for? And one case that I'm thinking about is just healthy housing. If we can spend a little bit of extra money to design housing that's healthier and creating a healthier environment for residents, they'll be spending less money on medical costs. Can you get that back? Can you get that back from the big the hospitals or the medical corporations to then invest back into the communities, because it's saving them money too? Everything seems to revolve around money in the U.S., but can we use that then and then feed that back into the community and say, look, this is what we're doing. There's less diabetes, there's less heart disease, and let's give it back into the community to snowball it even more. And how do we do that? And we need the data, right? So we need that data, and then we need to fold that back into the communities.
Right. Yes, excellent. So basically, you're pointing out to the ability of, let's say, advanced computing systems such as big data and maybe artificial intelligence to provide evidence on impact that we can achieve when we redesign our cities. And by providing that evidence, also showing that what we're doing is in the long run much more cost efficient. So you might as well participate as an investor from the beginning, because we are certain that you will save money over the long run. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important and intriguing thought. I know it's quite a complicated thing to prove impact, but data is certainly something that we need to build this on. Susanne, I don't want to close before you hadn't had the chance to say something about this. On data and on the question I posed, what would be your take?
Besides what already has been said, like in Germany, we have this concept of the Stadtwerke, which is a local utility provider. So there's some kind of local connection to it, and they basically, in respect to the energy system, they also have a lot of data. They possess a lot of data. And obviously for them, it's also important to keep this data, because for them, data has a value. So I guess those actors in respect to also coming up with like integrated city energy plans, and those are very important. And I guess maybe because they are active locally, maybe there's also more trust that you would basically give them their data than, say, some kind of big international corporation, which I can understand. But in general, I think it will be quite interesting to see how basically concepts will further be developed also in other parts of this world where data protection isn't at such a high level. And I'm intrigued how basically those probably developments will also put pressure on us. So if we basically manage to have different forms of operation systems, so I guess it's a very interesting and but also very crucial question how developments will thrive in that respect.
Thank you very much. Yes, so stay tuned, because this is basically also the main goal of some of our activities at Fraunhofer in Germany, to come up with feasible solutions on digital sovereignty for cities and for citizens. So I would love to continue chatting with you. It's been such an inspiring talk. Thank you so much for it. Unfortunately, I have to wrap up. And I think we've heard quite some important points today. Of course, we couldn't talk about everything which is relevant for Biopolis, but I think we've touched upon quite some important issues, such as that we need to have a local focus, and we need to start on the local level when it comes to accelerating green city planning, such that we can and we need to work on the policy level in order to accelerate, in order to help mainstream some of the good ideas. We need to democratize data. We need to put it back into the hand of citizens. And we need to put justice, and particularly climate justice, at the center of what we do. And I think these are some four, quite important and encouraging takeaways from this chat. So, Catherine, Nisha, Susanne, thank you so much for being with me. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And to everyone who was listening, I wish a continued great event. Thank you very much. Goodbye.